We can be found on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Like, share, subscribe, and leave us a comment down below. Now, on with the show.
We'll do it live. Fucking thing.
Death Holler is a horror
We'll do it live.
created by two true horror fans to bring to the table your favorite horror films. Topics include, but are not limited to, historical horror, gore, the occult, and terror. Listener discretion is advised.
So we've kind of discussed who is in the movie, but I think it's about time that we actually get into the movie itself.
I think it's time.
So, Act 1, the Bramford. I would like to call this act the perfect middle-class life. That's basically the gist of what Rosemary is trying to accomplish during this, and it doesn't work out for her, as we'll see, but in the book... That's one of the interesting things about the book to me is that if you're reading it, and even Polanski said this, he said it's more like a kitchen drama for most of the book, and it is. It's like some kind of, you're watching a middle to upper middle class family just kind of going about, daily life, buying things for the apartment, kind of, going out on dates, blah, blah, blah. There's some stuff going on in the background, but that's generally the gist of it. But I would also say that if anything, this movie and the book in general is personified by the statement, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Oh, yeah.
And there's several meanings to that. One of them is, that means that all the good things that you planned on doing but never acted on, can be what leads the road to hell. I'm more leaning toward the description of it where it's like you do good things for people, but they backfire on you, and that's what leads to your doom. And if that personifies Rosemary, in my opinion, from the book and in the movie. The movie itself begins with this haunting lullaby. Assume that it's like Rosemary singing to her baby.
Yeah, it's called Rosemary's Lullaby.
Right, and it's panning over New York as we're hearing this, and it's kind of creepy, to be perfectly honest. But
oh yeah, did you know that Mia Farrow sang it?
I did not know that. That's cool. But the odd thing for me, and this kind of ties into what I was going over with in the discussion about the actors and actresses, is that this is one of the only scenes in the film that I remember seeing that actually has like a wide sweeping, like panoramic shot. Like, if this movie's kind of weird to me because like when it first starts out, it goes from this to like a close in shot of both Rosemary and Guy as they're being taken on a tour of the Bramford. And it's very tight and very close on the two actors, the actor and actress in the scene, like, and the people around them. It's like you don't really see anything around them. It's kind of like right on their faces. And it stays like that for most of the film. I don't know of many scenes where it's not like right on Rosemary, like somewhere like, it's got her face like, right in the scene. And did you notice that when you were watching it, like how it was kind of weird, like it was framed right on her, like for most of it?
Yeah, and it was obviously intentional because her appearance changes so much through the film. But there are some scenes, if it's not them directly, it's visual things that we need to see around the house, like obviously the closet. There's things she pointed out in the film. I don't want to get into it too much because it's going to be a discussion, but where she talks about when she goes into the neighbor's house, there was pictures that were missing, which we know what pictures were missing.
Right, yeah.
But I didn't catch that because probably for the same reason you say, is that it was always so close to her face and his face.
And that's exactly why I was bringing it up, because when I was watching it, I saw that and I was like, okay, why is Polanski doing this? Is he doing it so that we only see what Rosemary, like her directly, and we can't really see stuff off in the periphery, so we don't assume anything else, or so that we can be like, I don't know, scared by it, or, like surprised when it happens. But then going back to the discussion, with actors and actresses about how he was agnostic and he filmed this to kind of make you question Rosemary. I think he deliberately did it so you was always on Rosemary and you didn't get another point of view. So it's like, well, maybe this other stuff didn't happen. We only know what Rosemary was seeing, like right in her face all the time. So maybe all this shit's made up, I think that's what he was going for.
Yeah, definitely questioned at the end of the film. I started having questions. So that is a good point.
And I questioned. I was like, well, maybe that's how Polanski does his movies, because I wasn't, that's bad on me, is not watching a lot of films with him as a director. But I was like, okay, I'm going to watch something else that he did, and I saw Chinatown with Jack Nicholson was there, and I decided to watch it, and it's totally the opposite. He's got these beautiful, mid to widescreen shots of one in particular stands out to me where Jack Nicholson's character is going down in this barren little area underneath a bridge that's and he's going to investigate the murder of somebody underneath there, and it's panned way out and you just kind of see the sun in the background and the bridge as it's shining over the bridge onto Nicholson, and it's the complete opposite of this movie because it's way far out, and I'm just like, no, he can do wide panoramic shots. So he did this deliberately. I mean, that was my proof of concept. That movie's night and day different. So he deliberately put all those shots right on Rosemary because he wanted it to be just that way.
Yeah, it had to be deliberately. And I think it was, considering you're talking about the other film, Chinatown, and how it was different and how it brings something different to the film, that's pretty genius. You got to give him that.
Yeah, and another thing, right off the bat, talking about this scene where they're in the apartment building being taken on the tour, when he focuses off of Rosemary, he's focusing on the little parts of the building that are decrepit. It's like he's showing the rot that's inside the Bramford right off the bat as they're going in there. They think they're getting this big nice place, but then he shows the floor's busted up. There's somebody repairing some kind of door that's been scuffed and all this, and it's he focuses in on it so he can he's basically setting the tone or the idea. It's this place is rotted, from the inside out. That's where they're going with this. And it's in the novel too, but he did a great job of visualizing that and kind of putting that, front and center basically, to give you that idea as they're first even going into this place.
And as a true woman, it's funny because obviously she totally oversees that. She saw it. They made it clearly obvious she saw it, but once you see that beautiful, entertainment room that they show, which is basically a living room.
Right, yeah.
And she's just she falls in love. Everything else totally goes out the window. And I'm that's how I felt. I saw what I saw at the beginning. It's oh, fuck, man. How much are they paying for this place if that's what's going on? Obviously, the person showing them the place said we would charge more if we could. That was brought up, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, once I saw that entertainment room or the living room, if you want to call it that, I was just oh, sold. I want to live here. Fuck that creepy closet. I want to live here.
Well, we'll get to that closet here in a minute, but I think that's funny that you say that because I thought it was odd knowing, later bringing up the fact that she noticed about the pictures being gone off the wall. That's totally a female thing to notice. A guy does not pay
absolutely.
one bit of shit, attention that's going on. But I just thought it was funny. It was you're right, all this bad stuff going on. It's she pays no attention because she's just giddy about what she's getting inside the apartment. And it's a feminine thing that you don't really pick, that you wouldn't normally get. But then I'm noticing this scene too. It's where we see John Cassavetes, his acting, his guy is kind of starting out, you're kind of getting, he's got these shifty eyes in this scene. His eyes are dark. He sees all this stuff. He sees the rot. But he ignores it. And I think that also plays into the movie because, he knows what Roman and Minnie are doing, but he also doesn't give a shit about that either because it's as long as it gets him what he wants, that's all he cares about. And it's another little thing that plays into the movie. It's he sees the rot because he looks at it. He looks at all this stuff. It's just like a guy would. And he just whatever, Ro likes it. So, if that gets me laid later, who gives a shit? That's basically what I got from him in this scene.
Yeah, I do know that he was a little bit more reluctant until after the scene where he talked with Roman. So well, we can get into that. I can tell you how I feel about that because we're not quite there
yeah,
yet.
yeah. We'll discuss all about him and his, aspirations and all that. I don't have many good things to say about Guy. But anyways, all I'm going to say about him in this scene is the shifty eyes. It kind of even begins starting you out in the movie. It's like, should I trust this bastard? Like he's like literally he can't keep his eyes on anything. Like he's, It's when you see somebody who's shifty-eyed, it's like they're hiding something. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's the classic comical, like, oh, I can't look you straight in the eyes because I'm a liar. And that's right off the bat. That's kind of what they're setting up with him. And that could have been Polanski that did that. That could have been Cassavetes that did that. But whoever did it, I thought was perfect.
I didn't get so much of a liar vibe. I don't know how I feel about this vibe. Like, this is unsure. That's what I got from it.
There's a scene later right after they get out of the apartment and they're on the street and like Rosemary's like just head over heels over the apartment. Like she can't stop talking about it. Just like you said, she's like, oh, I can do this. I can do that, and he's just giving her a look like, yeah, whatever, babe. It's like he kind of blows it off. Cause I mean, he's, he does bring up that he's worried about the lease and all that, which is a guy thing to do, but he's always looking off in the distance when you see him in that scene. Like he doesn't look at her. He doesn't acknowledge her. He's like, he's looking at every person around him in that scene, and that just adds to him being like, I don't know, it's like I said earlier, it's like almost like he's always looking to the future because he can't focus on what's in front of him.
He cannot focus on what's in front of him, and he's probably also thinking how much this is going to fucking cost him.
Yeah,
can we talk about that? Because that's what I was thinking. He's probably thinking, fuck, man, we already have a half-ass decent place. You want to move into this fucking infested, rotted fucking piece of shithole. Because you're all excited about the living room, because I was too. Whatever. And it's funny because that's how our house was purchased. Look at it. I'm not going to get into that, but I picked my house. The husband had nothing to do with it. He's like, pick it. We'll pay for it. Granted, we both pay for it together. It's a little different. We're in different times. But he didn't care. It was just like, whatever. Are you going to be happy in it? Fine. And I don't think we'll ever buy a house like that ever again. I don't think he'll allow that.
Probably not.
No.
It's got that going on, and I don't know. It's funny too in the book that it's based off of. There's a scene that they leave out of the movie, or Polanski leaves out, which isn't needed, but I think kind of informs even more about Guy. Is that and kind of sets up the movie a little bit more. They have a lease going on with another apartment. It's one of those it's a nice place. Hutch says it's a nice place, but it's one of those places that's just like, if you see one apartment in the building, you've seen all of them because they're all the same. They're all built the same way. They're all, like in a subdivision or something. All the houses look exactly the same layouts, maybe a little bit of, design choice differences here and there, but they're cookie cutter. And Rosemary hates it for that reason. And Guy doesn't really care, but, whenever she brings it, what they do in the novel that they don't do in this that I thought was interesting was right off the bat they establish he's a good liar, which is good, when it comes later in the story because Rosemary basically says, well, Ro, we have this apartment already. How am I going to get out of this? And she's like, you're a good actor. You can get out of it. I know you can do it. And he lies to the people. He says something about he's going on a USO tour and he's going to be out of the States for so long and he can't do anything with it, lying through his teeth, and they believe it. And he's like, I told you, babe. Or he's like, you're right, babe. I can, and basically setting up that he's a great liar. And, I'm like, oh, God, okay. Yeah, he lies all right. he that's definitely his character.
I didn't read the book, but even in the film, there are some things. I'm going to point something out to you when it comes time. There's some setup in this film that I don't know, like you almost have to be a woman to catch. And in general, like they put it there for a reason. It's not just for women. There's certain things where they do set up really well in this film, and it is so just, I don't know, it's just there. You don't even notice it, like smoother than cream cheese on a hot bagel, They just slid that right on there.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to hearing what you're talking about because it leads to the next point I want to make about this intro scene is I love little details that, just like you're saying, like when they get inside the apartment, they're looking, through the stuff. There's that desk there that Mrs. Gardenia, which ties back to our discussion about Sabrina, at least the comic book version of it. But anyways, Mrs. Gardenia, who's passed away, and that's who they're getting their apartment, similar to, I guess, how Lennon got his, which is weird. But anyways.
Oh, yeah, somebody passed away.
exactly. But anyways, they've got that desk there, and she'd just written like a letter to somebody, but she hadn't sent it because I guess she passed into a coma and then passed away, which will come into the movie later on. Just out of nowhere, and on the letter, there's a little thing that you can see on there that flashes real quick, and it says, and it's just like a little cutoff thing that says, "Then merely the intriguing pastime I believed it to be, I can no longer associate myself," and then that's where it cuts off, and it's kind of like this little sliver about what might be going on with her and the Castavets and the other people in the Bramford. I thought that was kind of interesting that she heard some of the stuff going on through the walls maybe, and she got intrigued by it and kind of made friends with them and didn't think that it was for her. And when she tried to get out, the hint is that they kind of offed Mrs. Gardenia, and that's kind of what led to all this.
Blood in, blood out, bitch. I'm just kidding.
Yep.
You know what? I have to say, and I don't know how you feel. I think I know how you feel, but if I'm, first off, buying an older building that somebody passed away, and I think she passed away at the hospital, actually. I don't think she actually died.
They made a point in at least the novel, if not the movie, where the person says, like, oh, no, she didn't die here. Like, Rosemary gives, like, this startled, like, look toward the guy who's doing it. And he's like, no, it didn't happen here. And she's
didn't
like,
happen
oh,
here,
God,
yeah. Still, I don't know. It's still kind of creepy to me. But if I had read something like that, which she read it directly, and she gave it a second look, too.
I'm
going to be like, I think I'm going to pass. And I tell you, my husband, if he would tell me I'm crazy. Like, what? Oh, you read something? It said something about Hail Satan? That's not bad. What could possibly go wrong? And I'd be like, no, I don't feel good about this. Like, I don't want, and granted, it didn't say Hail Satan, but that was something that would get me to be like, I'm good. I don't want this.
Oh, yeah. I'm too paranoid about that stuff. I mean, I'll go one step further. The same scene, they noticed the closet's been blocked off by what they call the secretary, and they can't figure out, and she was a little small lady, so somebody must have helped her, do something to push it up again, and there's nothing in the closet. That would have sent chills up my spine. I would have looked at my wife and I'd said, we're not buying this place, because it's the typical setup for a haunted house film, which we've already discussed is my biggest horror films, like, because they scare the shit out of me. It's like, that closet was blocked off for a reason. Something came out of that closet. I'm not getting this place. That would have been my first thought, Yeah,
there was fucking brand new linens in there and shit. The vacuum was in there, and I'm like, that was creepy. I don't know. That just creeped me out.
And I actually got creeped out by that in the film. I've got to give them credit. They did a good job with that, and in the book. I mean, because I was reading that, I was like, oh shit, here we go. There's what was behind that closet door. It's like, that's the typical setup.
Speaking of that secretary, though, I know this is creepy, and you probably shouldn't do this, but I would have been like, could I keep that secretary? That thing's badass looking.
Well, what's funny about that is in the book, they ask for several things that's in that apartment, including the writing desk that they see the note on.
Oh, okay. I mean, it was nice stuff. I mean, because you think about the times, I know back then it probably would have looked like junk, but nowadays we see that stuff, we're like, I can refinish that,
It wasn't that bad because, like, Rosemary really wanted that writing desk, and that was the one thing that the son of Mrs. Gardenia wouldn't let her have in the novel. So, kind of interesting, but
okay.
I just as a starting scene, I just think it's great.
Got
the
really good setup.
And it something else, a little bit of trivia. The inside of all the apartments in the Bramford were actually based upon actual drawings that Ira Levin did, and they were all stages. They weren't actually apartments in the Dakota or anything. They actually went out and built all these stages, but they were based on designs that Ira Levin actually, made up to look like the Dakota. So, because he was so familiar with it, he, drew, he's like, here's what they look like. And they're like, all right. And they built the stages to look just like what he drew. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh, definitely.
And I really like the detail in a lot of these sets that they've got, because it kind of reminded me a little bit. We talked about Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. One of the best things was like just the lived-in setting that they had built up around all the characters. Like you look in the background, there's just all this stuff that you would expect to see in like somebody's house. That like some of the a lot of some movies do it. Some movies are kind of like you look in the background, it's like, man, that place is too spick and span. There's no way they have like 5 kids. What is this bullshit? It's like, I don't believe this. And it's like, and you watch Rosemary's Baby, and especially the scenes where they're like laying on the bed and they've got like the bed, like behind them, the headboard is kind of like these 2 bookcases they've kind of built by stacking bricks up and all that. It looks lived in. I've got to give credit to, Polanski and the, design department. They had really richly designed, sets that made you believe what you were seeing. I mean, granted, there wasn't a lot of different sets in the movie, but they really did well with what they had.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you could see, given the opportunity, if you got to see past the 2 actors,
exactly.
Like the trim and the wood kind of details and things like that, they did a really good job with. And I don't know that they have what we have where we can do synthetic materials now back then. I know they had paper mache back then, but I was kind of wondering how expensive was these setups, in general. Not the whole film we could find out, but how much of that included the budget for the setup. So
yeah, and the novel goes into a lot of that stuff too. Like Rosemary's always like building different little things in the apartment building, that they have. Like she's designing, like she's putting like paper wrapping around the book, like the shelves and the closets and stuff like that. So
which she does in the film too.
Yeah, and she's working on the little seat covers to go in the bay windows and that sort of thing. So they do a good job with that. And of course, it's got the '60s, like bright colors and all that going on later on whenever she redesigns the apartment. And it's a rich background. They just did a good job. I mean, it looks natural as opposed to, like I said, you watch, some films now and like they've got like the people have like 5 or 6 kids and the kids are always like running around acting crazy, but then like their house looks spick and span. I'm like, I don't believe that for a fucking second.
Not today.
The next big scene that's in the movie, I mean, there's some other stuff that goes on, but the scene with Hutch. And the only reason I bring this up is because I think it's in the book and in the movie too, more so in the book I would argue, but in both, I just find it interesting. He's like the classic doomsayer, doom prophet, type of like, don't do this, something bad's going to happen type character. It's a horror staple. Primarily you find it in a lot of slasher films, and the slasher films usually have the weird hobo that runs up and it's like, don't go to Camp Crystal Lake, you'll die. It's like, but I thought about it and I was like, well, they kind of had that in the old movies too, because you'd have like these scientists, like professors that would tell Frankenstein, it's like, don't delve too deeply into this. That's God's terrain. You're damning yourself if you do this, So it is a classic, character archetype, So I thought that was kind of cool.
Well, and I think Hutch was very subtle too, if you think about it, because he told her about things that were a hard pass for me. I mean, I saw red flags going up every word he said. But he was also very subtle in the sense where it wasn't like, don't do this, because it was like, oh, I know about that place. Oh, it's really, really good. He made like, have you ever heard of those compliment sandwiches where he offers one good thing to say about it, throws in the demonic, bullshit. And then it's like, but I mean, the history on that is, or the artistry in that is gorgeous. Same thing when it came to the doctor. He had questions about certain things about her pregnancy and everything, but then he was like, oh, but Dr. Saperstein is a really good doctor. He was the ultimate compliment sandwich maker.
He was, and it was kind of funny too, but it was also natural that he wasn't like, like I said, the weird hobo character. He was more like he was like telling her all this stuff about how the Trench sisters were like eating, people in between like bites of the meal that he was preparing for him. Like he would be sitting there dabbing at his, like the corners of his mouth with his napkin. Oh yeah, the Trench sisters, they ate people, it's like, it's just, it was an interesting, take on it.
No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. Of course, Guy being the asshole he is, he's got to like say something about, it's like, how dare he say something about this? We've already got the lease. Don't get scared now, Rosemary, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's kind of the first sign in the book and in the movie too about how much of an asshole he is. Because, Hutch, maybe not as much in the film, but definitely in the novel, is portrayed as basically her, father figure, like a stand-in
like a mentor or
figure.
protector.
Yeah, primarily because in the book it's established that she's estranged from her family, and I think that kind of leads into her doom too, because she has nobody really to rely on other than Guy and Hutch, and Hutch gets taken away from her. So it's like like the good angel on her shoulder gets taken away, and you've got shitty ass Guy there to kind of take over, but. It's just kind of shitty for Guy to be so hateful and dismissive of like her father figure. I mean, especially if he cares about her. He knows how much she respects Hutch, and it's at this point, like, it's more so in the novel than it is in the movie, because it's real quick in the movie. But like in the novel, he's just like there's a whole, like, a few lines where he's just like, how dare he say that, what an asshole, and she's like, oh, hush, he was trying his best, that sort of thing. So they move into the apartment after that, and there's that's whenever they start hearing the weird things through the walls, which I thought was kind of interesting and well done. That's kind of a holdover from the novel too, but
that would have pissed me off.
Well,
how clearly you could hear everything else. It's like, oh, they're gonna hear us banging,
And that was the thing that I thought too, is like, because it's in the novel and the movie both, where Guy is making fun of Minnie and Minnie's voice, because she's got such a nasally like Midwestern like annoying voice, and he's like, oh, listen, and she's like, oh, hush, it's like, why didn't they hear him? They probably did, but
they probably
it's
did,
like
yeah.
But if they can, if they can hear Minnie and Roman, they can, or at least Minnie, she can hear him, because Guy does not like lower his voice at all when he makes fun of her. It's like, he's as loud as he wants to be whenever he does it. So
oh, yeah.
I thought that was kind of, but they have like this weird chanting and stuff going on during one of the scenes.
That was creepy. It happened as soon as like they started kind of like making out. So almost like, oh, cool, they're about to make a baby. Let's fucking, let's pray to the Dark Lord.
And yeah, and it's and yeah, you're right. It was like right whenever they had just made love, like when they first moved into the apartment, and there was that whole scene where they were, kind of a cute scene between the two of them before things turned bad, where they've got like the one lone lamp in the floor, and they're kind of eating their takeout together, and they decide to have make love or whatever, and then like later on they're like laying in the bed and they're like kissing and all that, and that's whenever they hear the weird, like, it's like a monotone chanting, and there's like this weird woodwind that's playing, which we find out later is a recorder, because Dr. Shand, the dentist, is the one playing the recorder, which is something that Guy shouldn't know, but he does, and that's kind of what Rosemary picks up on too.
Oh my god! It's just, it was funny because like that scene happened, and they kind of just pulled away from each other, like, what? Yeah, I could tell you what, there ain't no babies being made if I'm hearing that shit. Okay, first off. Second, no wonder they had to drug her to get a baby made. Because if you're gonna start doing that while I'm doing it,
well,
that's gonna
you
ruin
hear
the
that
mood.
You hear that, and that might be like, where I'm at mentally, or just, where we're at, I can't speak for society, but it definitely is like, just the fact of what time period we're in now. I'd be sitting there thinking, like, what weird orgy have they got going on in this next, like, what is this?
Oh
yeah,
God.
so, but the scene after that is what really kind of goes back to what I was saying about the road to hell is paved with good intentions. This is the scene that solidifies it for me, because it's where Rosemary's in the basement in the laundromat, and she meets Terry Gianofrio. That's the girl who's staying with the cast of the Castavetes or whatever, and she doesn't have to say anything to this girl. She can just see her, mind her own business, and do her laundry. That's all she had to do. But two things are working against her. First of all, Hutch's, words about, especially about the baby. That's the one thing every time she goes, she don't care about, Adrian Mercado and the Trench sisters or the high level of suicides that he mentions in the Brantford. She does, none of that sticks with her. But she remembers that baby wrapped up in that newspaper in the basement, helter-skelter basement. Mm-hmm. and she's afraid of it. Every time she goes down there in the novel, like she hates the place. And so Hutch dooms her, like, by trying to warn her of doom. He dooms her because he scares her so much in the basement that she feels like she has to befriend this girl to kind of like, so they can both go down there and do their laundry together and kind of get over their, because they both, say that it's a creepy place.
Yeah.
But she's also too nice not to just sit there and not say anything. Like today, you know, a lot of people would be like, whatever, I'm on my phone, you know, who gives a shit about who this is. But it's different time, and she's from Omaha, and that's just her character. She's, you know, she's lapsed Catholic, but she's still a Catholic, and she's just like, well, this seems like a nice young girl. She kind of reminds me of a movie star. You know, she mentions in the novel, it's like Anna Marie Alberghetti or something like that, and that's cool. She can't stop staring because she really thinks it's that actress. But anyways, like she has to say hello. She has to greet this girl because that's out of kindness. But that dooms her because that's where she gets introduced to to Terry, and Terry is connected to the Castavets, and she's got the you know, the little charm around her neck. And she's, you know, that's where the Tanis roots first introduced, because, you know, Rosemary noses the smell. And if she hadn't, just that one scene's pivotal to me, because if she hadn't said anything to, you know, Terry, and just went about her way, she would, I mean, when Terry died, it would have been nothing. She'd be like, oh, that's that weird girl, you know, that, you know, I met in the basement. That's sad that she's dead, but, you know, whatever. But she makes conversation with her, and that's whenever she knows that, realizes she's with the Castavets, when she realizes that, you know, Terry tells her how much they mean to her and all that. And of course, Rosemary, you know, later on, the next scene where she dies, Terry dies, has to mention that to the Castavets, and that puts her on their radar. So, I mean, it all kind of leads into each other. This one scene, if she just left it alone, she'd been fine.
Well, I wonder too, because if this was one of those setup scenes, we'll never know, because, you know, Terry died. But I wonder if this is one of those setup scenes where she meets this girl in the basement. They talk. They're exchanging information. You know, they're talking to each other. Who are you? Who are you married to? What do you do? Blah, blah, blah. That we don't know that Terry went upstairs, and not because she was spying or anything, but because she met this person. She was excited. She had information, and they're like, sweet, fresh meat, you know?
Well, that could have happened too, but like I said, you know, if she hadn't even bothered to be nice to her in the first place, which, I mean, that's...
Well, at first, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. And I mean, and the death happened so soon after this, because they literally don't have another time to even go down there and have, you know, another meetup in the laundromat.
It was like the next scene, right?
Right, yeah, it was like literally the scene after that, whenever she comes back, and it's like this horrific scene where all this, like, you know, bright red blood's all over the, you know, pavement, and her head's caked open, and, you know, it's like
eyeball popped out. Oh, my daughter was so excited over that.
You know, staring at the sky. You know, it's just what, like I said, it's, to me, it's the defining scene. It's like, just, oh no, don't do it, don't, you know, that's the scene where you'd be screaming at the person, don't go in that room. You know, it's like, you know, don't talk to her, but, you know, she does, and so that's, you know, kind of what sets up the rest of the movie. The other one thing I bring up about this scene is that they depict Guy throughout, like, at least in the marketing for the movie, as he's being like the struggling actor. And I think that's bullshit, because he's not struggling. Like, they clearly have no issues with money. Like, either one, like him and Rosemary are fine. Anytime she wants something, he buys it for her. I don't think credit was as available in that time period, so he was just buying this stuff. And it never depicts that he has a trouble getting a role. He just has trouble getting the roles he wants. And that's the defining thing I think about him as an actor, or as a person. It's not that he doesn't get roles. He gets them all the time, and he gets lucrative roles. I mean, commercials, you know, he stars in commercials all the time, but they're not, he wants to be a Hollywood actor. That's his, you know, like.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it this way. This is, because I agree with what you're saying, because I'm like, well, they don't seem like they're struggling. However, I think he has to work harder to be able to bring in the money that he brings. Whereas if he was getting what you just said, more lucrative roles, it would be working smarter, not harder, to bring in the money to be able to afford their lifestyle, is the way that I looked at it.
That is true, but I also feel like it kind of plays more to his vanity more than anything else, because he seems like he's not happy just because he doesn't have the fame that goes along with it.
Oh,
because
absolutely. It played into his assholiness all the way.
Every time Rosemary mentions, you know, it's like, oh, my husband's an actor, people ask what he's been in, and she mentions, like, you know, the two things he's been on, you know, Luther and Nobody Loves an Albatross. They give her like a blank stare, you know, obviously, because nobody's ever heard of it. And I'm sure that...
No, I was kidding.
Well, I think one of them's a play, but that, you know, that's even more so. And it's like, And it's like, I think Guy probably gets the same responses, or he sees that in the people that, because I'm sure Rosemary introduces him that way to people, and, he sees that response and it eats at him. I think that's his like motivation. It's like, shit, nobody knows who I am. I gotta do something. I gotta break out, But it just, I think it's disingenuous to paint him as a struggling actor because he's good at what he does and he gets a lot of parts. It's just not, and that's what kills me later is he makes a deal with the devil literally, not because I could accept it if he was starving on the street. And it's like, listen, I got to get somewhere. My family's, I hate coming home at night and I see my kids, starving or whatever. You can understand somebody who's, maybe making a deal or thinking about it based upon that. But you get somebody who's like, upper middle class who has no problems with any kind of money issues, and they go out anytime they want to, they go to whatever plays they want to, they shop at some of the high-end apartments that are high-end department stores in New York City of all places, and then sit there and tell me that guy has to make a deal with the devil because he no, that bullshit.
Wouldn't you say that would be greed that was driving him though? Like, I have all this good stuff but I want more.
I don't know if he cares about the stuff because he never acts like in the novel that he gives a shit about that. He just wants to be in Hollywood. He wants his name in lights. That's what he in the novel, that he doesn't care about the money that goes along with it.
It's not right. Don't get me wrong. Like him making the deal, which by the way, I had told you that I had watched this as a child. And then of course I have to watch this into adulthood. And one thing that I had never realized, which is so funny until I watched it most recently, was that he had made a deal with the devil. I thought as a child he was just always in on it, that the reason they moved that place was because he was in on it and everything else that followed. But it wasn't until I saw the scene where they're at their, the neighbor's home, and you could just see it on his face, what had happened. He made a deal, and I was like, that motherfucker made a deal. And my daughter's like, what? I was like, he made a deal with the devil.
And they make it more apparent in the novel, too, because going back to the ambiguity or whatever of the movie, ambiguous nature of it, ambiguity is what I was trying to think of. In the book, he doesn't like he won't get naked around Rosemary at all after he goes over there for like the time whenever he's inducted or whatever, like midway through or whatever, with the Castavets, they have this big one of their Sabbaths or whatever, and they induct him. He gets a mark on his shoulder. He does not undress for her whatsoever after that point. He won't even let her see him in the shower.
Was this in the book?
It was in the book. In the movie,
okay, I was about to say I don't remember in the movie.
Well, in the movie, they go the opposite route. Like, she mentions that. She's like, you have the mark. They put it on the shoulder. He pulls his shirt off, and there's nothing on there. He's like, look, you're full of shit. There's nothing on my shoulder. You're just crazy from, losing your baby, so go back to sleep.
Check his left butt cheek. It's on his left butt cheek.
Yeah, or something like that. But it's like, the ambiguity of it, it's just like, in the movie. But I just, there's definitely a point in the book where he's gone through it and he's accepted it and all that, and then he's in on it. That's all I was getting ready. I was making a point of with that. Going what you're saying. He's not in it on it from the beginning. Actually, he's empathetic in the book. And I can't say in the movie at all, but he's empathetic in the book up to that point whenever he actually gets in with Roman and Minnie, because like even though he has a couple of asshole scenes, he does actually genuinely show scenes that he cares about Rosemary in the novel. Like he sees her like struggling with stuff, and he'll actually be a good husband to her. And that's why I said Robert Redford seemed like to me more of a because there's just something about John Cassavetes in this that like he doesn't give me that, like he's not empathetic. I don't look at the guy and I see like a scumbag. I don't. That's bad for me to say about him as an actor.
I got mostly scumbag. I did see a few bouts of raggarts, where he was like, "Fuck!" Like he knew he made a bad choice. I saw it, but it wasn't. It didn't linger.
The scene where he gets called from the agency to tell him that his rival Donald Baumgartner has been stricken blind. It's more pronounced in the novel. That's why I also said he has more empathy in the novel, but it's also in the movie. You can see in his face, like he's like, oh shit, that's because I did that. That's, you see that in his, so he does have regrets. He's not like completely gone, but I don't think he's ever really a nice guy throughout this whole, movie.
No, and he's totally driven on just, like you said, always looking towards the future.
After this is when we see the scene where we got the dead Terry Gianfrio, and that's another part of her damning, because she cannot leave it alone. She has to walk over to the pimp and the clown and tell them, "Oh, Terry really loved you. She said that you took such good care of her when she needed you." And that's when she was definitely on the radar. She wasn't before this. She was definitely on the radar at that point. They're like, "Oh, she's a fairly attractive young woman who has looks like her husband might be an attention-craved whore. Let's get these people in on it." I don't. It's just one of those scenes. It's like I just wish that she had decided not to say anything to him, but it is what it is. Okay, so we go to the next scene, and that's the death scene with Terry, and then that's when the pimp and the clown show up, like I said earlier, and that it's another scene where Rosemary's just damning herself. Like, she cannot leave it alone. She has to go over and talk to Roman and Minnie, tell them how much Terry and appreciated how they took her in and all this other stuff. And if she would just not said anything to them, she might have still ended up on the radar eventually, but not the way. I mean, she directly got in their crosshairs. I mean, what would you think about that scene?
I mean, I didn't think a lot about it in terms of she shouldn't have done that, even how things panned out, because I still had that thought of possibility that maybe the reason Terry died was because they found someone, just like when you saw that nun scene, they found someone probably, I don't know, maybe a little bit better to bring forth the son of the devil. And so they offed Terry, I think, because she might have went and said, "Hey, I met this wonderful girl. This new couple just moved in." And she unknowingly gave them all this information about Rosemary. And then they're like, "Bingo, we're going to use her. You're gone."
That's true. I never thought about that, because they don't really show who wrote the note, so that could be a scene in the movie. I just assumed whenever I read it that she had killed herself, because it's hinted, at least, and it's probably because what I knew from the novel. In the novel, you hear Minnie through the wall say something about "you should have never told her," meaning that Roman informed Terry of what she was supposed to be doing, and she killed herself because she couldn't live with the knowledge that she was going to be, basically the son of the Antichrist, or the mother of the Antichrist.
Yeah, and there's that too. I think also, though, when they talk about the note, the police, it was, again, back to that horrible acting I told you about of, "Oh, yeah, we feel so bad." They're like, "Is this her handwriting?" "Oh, yes, 100%, for sure. Definitely. We definitely didn't write that ourselves and telling you that it's hers." They might as well have said that, because it was so, fake the way they're like, "Yep, 100%. They looked at it for 3 seconds and then turned away.
That's true. I don't know. I feel like, Rosemary coming over there was maybe, I don't know. I feel like if nothing else, it was a tipping point for them. Even if they had their eyes on her, whenever she came over and she deliberately made a point to say something to them, they're like, "Oh, yeah, we got you now."
Oh, definitely. 100%. She was, I don't know. They would have forced her way. The way the neighbors acted, they would have forced their ways into their lives one way or another, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's like I think they picked up on how accommodating she was, because it's a scene too, it's a couple scenes removed from this, but that's when Minnie pokes her nose in the apartment and says, "You're all right if I come in here and just kind of take a look around," and she knows the answer is going to be yes, because she's already kind of got that vibe from Rosemary that she's just super accommodating, just too nice for her own good. I was just sitting there thinking, I was like, if it'd been me, I'd been like, "No,
yeah,
you're not coming to my house. Who the fuck
times.
do you think you are?"
Did you see in Rosemary's face every time she invited herself over? She's like, "Yeah, sure, come in." She's being nice, but you can tell there are some specific times she's like, "I just don't want to deal with this."
she didn't want to deal with it, and they make a point. It's actually in the movie and in the book too. I mean, she brings it up to Roman about how Minnie invites him over to the apartment. You can tell by the way she says it that she doesn't really care if they go, but then like Guy kind of gets pissed off, and I actually have to give him credit. I kind of understand this point. He thought he was trying to keep from getting in the doghouse with her on this one. It's like if you said we have to go, we've got to go, and she's like, no, it's fine. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, as a guy, no, if your woman tells you that and then they say it's fine, we know what the answer to that is. You're gonna be pissed off about it, so let's just get it over with. I don't want to do it anyways, but fine.
It's very smart of you to realize that.
but it's like, but she goes out of her way to say, no, actually I don't want to go. I was just trying to be nice. Just say that you can't go and let's not go. I mean, she shouldn't have. I mean, the way she said it, she kind of made Guy feel like he was compelled to do it. But I mean, it was one of those things where she actually does say that she doesn't really feel like she wants to associate with him, but she's doing it out of kindness. And it just goes back to her character. She's too nice, and that's what kind of leads into what happens to her.
Well, that's what she gets.
Well, yeah, basically. I mean, I do like the scene though right after that where it shows like she's having trouble like dealing with like the scene that she saw with Terry, and like she has the dream where she's back in Catholic school and she's got Sister Agnes there, like basically talking to her. And I didn't know this at the time, but apparently Polanski like mismatched what was being said by Sister Agnes versus what's being shown in the film, to where like the mouth movements don't match the audio.
Oh, I caught
and
that.
He did that deliberately. He said, well, I don't know, I must have been looking off to the side or something when it was going on, but like he mentioned he did that deliberately because he said it's like, and I can't fault him for this because it's actually brilliant. He said, like, when you're in a dream and like you hear people talking to you, like they don't always, like their mouth doesn't match up. It's like what they're saying even when they're not saying it to you. And I'm like, that's actually brilliant because that's true.
Well,
like somebody could be just looking at you in a dream, and like what they're saying even if they don't like actually mouth the words to it.
Yeah, I mean, coming from a dreamer, that is legitimate. There's two things. You can't see their mouths. I don't ever see their mouths move, but yes, I can hear what they're saying clearly. I've also heard, and this is from that show that I was watching called Evil, a real quick sidetrack, is that allegedly you're not supposed to be able to read in your dream. So if you look at something visual, like say you think you're awake, but you're dreaming. If you look at something you're supposed to be able to read, you shouldn't be able to read it, and then that would indicate that you're dreaming.
That is, yeah, that is a real thing. Like, because anytime you look at a book or anything in a dream, if you're a dreamer, it's like gibberish all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's like random letters on a page. He also had a brilliant reason for why he wanted the words mismatched too, and I thought this was good, is because she was dreaming this at the same time Minnie was saying the shit, because it's actually Minnie who's saying all the stuff that Sister Agnes says. But he said that he did that deliberately also because it's like her mind is like trying to play catch up with her dreaming mind with what she's hearing like in the real world. So like she's hearing it like out of sync with how it's in the dream, and I was like, man, that's perfect. Like like that makes a lot of sense. Like if you heard somebody like saying random stuff to you while you was asleep dreaming, like it wouldn't pop up in your mind. It'd be like off somehow, like because your mind would be like trying to process what you're hearing in the real world. And there's a lot of good like little foreshadowing in that scene too that goes on that I like.
A lot, actually. Well, it seems like a lot, and it's a very short scene too.
It is, and the only thing that I will say that the novel might be slightly better in that scene, although it's almost a perfect rendition of the scene from the novel, so I can't fault it. But they do spell more things out, and again, that probably plays into Polanski trying to keep it more ambiguous. But like in the novel, like she actually hears like Sister Agnes say something to the effect of like she's Sister Agnes is basically arguing with Roman about how she doesn't know how he's the leader of anything, that she doesn't care what Laura Louise has to say about the matter, and that they shouldn't have told her, meaning Terry, anything. And how they could have gotten, and basically they could have gotten anyone else who was healthy and not a virgin to be to do what they were doing. They didn't have to get some drugged up whore. So, it's they basically spell out what's going on, in the novel, but they keep it a little bit more ambiguous in the movie, and I guess that might actually be to the benefit because it kind of keeps you guessing.
Well, yeah, and that's actually kind of funny because you're telling me this now, and I did not catch that. To me, the scene was so fast, so it was like, okay, what's going on? Because I'm looking at the nun talking, and what is happening? The words aren't matching her lips, so mentally, I'm not putting the words together. If I had I probably would have had to close my eyes, honestly, for that scene.
I think the only thing that makes it into the movie is basically the nun saying that they could have gotten anyone who's healthy and not a virgin, and basically hinting that they were, that's the main takeaway. And I think the rest of the stuff about Roman being the leader and all that's kind of left out, but it's a good setup for what's going to happen afterwards.
Definitely, yeah. That, like I said, that's one of those things I did not catch right off the bat.
We got to discuss the scene where they go over and have the dinner with them at the park.
Oh yeah,
at their apartment. You said you had some things to say about that dinner scene. What were you going to bring up about that?
Well, that was the one where that's where I became to the realization that he had made a deal with the devil. So that was one thing that I had, well, I shouldn't say with the devil, but I mean, basically made the deal that he made. I realized that for the first time, but where I didn't catch in that house where after this particular scene when they're walking back or they're in their own place and she's talking about I wonder what they do with the pictures that they put down. And naturally he didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't see that. Did you?
I didn't see it in the movie, but they, like we said before, they focus so much on Rosemary, you can't see the rest of the apartment. So it don't really matter. I mean, it's like she can say that all she wants, but you only see Rosemary. So, I mean, and I guess that plays into Polanski's whole thing because she says that the pictures were, but I mean, we didn't see it. Guy didn't see it. Guy wouldn't see shit anyways.
Well,
but,
yeah.
That's besides the point. But I mean, she's the only one that says that. So we've got to go by her word if we believe her as the protagonist. That's kind of where we're at with it. In the novel, it's pretty point blank because as soon as she walks into the room, of course, it's told from her perspective, so it's going to be, like more detailed. But like, there's a big wide open space in the living room where there should be tables and stuff like end tables, coffee tables, whatever, and it's just blank. There's nothing there. The seats are way far apart. Like where Roman sits is way on the other side of the room versus where her and Minnie and Guy sits at, which is odd. And all the pictures are taken down. There's like some, she says there's like a scuff mark on the floor where it looks like something was sitting before and it's not there now. And I think it's like a table they use for, like for the rituals or something. It's a lot more spelled out in the novel. Like I said, it's told from her perspective. So you see more of what's happening.
Yeah, she's very observant. But yeah, I didn't catch that. There was a scene following this. So this is just kind of a setup scene of they're becoming friends, basically. This is one of those, this is the start of, we're going to invite ourselves over because we're your friendly neighbors,
I've got to ask you, what did you think about the fact that Guy and Roman were just so blatant about their dislike and just disregard for the Pope?
Oh.
Like, I mean, it doesn't hit me that hard because I'm not a Catholic, but I was just like, I know I could see why Rosemary would be offended by this conversation.
Yeah,
even if she was a lapsed Catholic.
It struck a fire in me because I was like, whoa, first off, you don't talk about the Pope like that. Second, Roman, you're not lying. Because he said something just because, I don't know the exact line, but he's like, just because he's the Pope doesn't mean you have to love him or something like that. I mean,
yeah.
That's true. It's true. You don't have to. You shouldn't have to be forced. If there's anything that I'm teaching my current minions is that, okay, mom's Catholic and this is what I believe in, but you have the opportunity to kind of figure out what you want to on your own. I was given that liberty. I don't think in any religion you should be forced to anything, honestly, anymore. I don't think it's a good way to, keep somebody in that. But yeah, it did bother me. I don't know why. I didn't think it was evil or anything, but I was like, whoa, it's the Pope. But then I was like, sometimes I don't like the Pope, so.
I thought it was an interesting scene. I mean, like, I was offended for Rosemary, but like I said, it didn't really, I was like, I was with you. I was like, well, Roman had some good points, but I could also see, it was like Roman was turning on the charm a little bit in that scene, like especially toward Guy, and of course that's deliberate because he's winning him over.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, but I could see why more people would be attracted to that couple because of Roman, because there's nothing about Minnie. I was like, who in the heck? Why would anybody put up with this? Old Biddy. I mean, she's ridiculous. I mean, nosy. She's, got that horrible nasally voice. I mean, it's like, and they're like, I was like, okay, well, they probably hang out with him because Roman's kind of a draw. Like, he's got some interesting stories, like, Guy said.
Was it him that is like, ask me where I've been. I've been anywhere.
Like that old Johnny Cash song, I've been everywhere, man.
He's the most interesting man in the world.
Which that song by Johnny Cash is actually about a serial killer in theory, so that's even more, that's even more interesting.
Wow, shit.
But I just it's an interesting scene, and the only thing about that is at the end where Rosemary has the dessert and like she says notice there's a bitter taste to it and she doesn't really want to finish it off, but again she does it out of kindness because she can't say no to anybody, which is her
this is how you got into this predicament, okay?
What did you think was in that food that she ate? Because Guy he eats 2 helpings and he says he doesn't notice anything, which he doesn't notice anything regardless, but I don't think it was in his food. I think they put Tanis in there.
I was going to say, I thought it was Tanis, and of course, okay, so I did a very, very little research on Tanis. It is definitely a made-up root or fungus for this film, so they made it up just for Rosemary's Baby. It's not something that had any actual, which I thought it would have been cool if they had used something. There are so many witchy herbs and roots and stuff that they use with most intention more than anything. So you could have picked something real to use to put in. By the way, that necklace which is a pendulum. It's not exactly a pendulum, but anything could be a pendulum. But they sell them at the witch stores. I call it the witch stores. They're not. But you can put stones in there, so you can put your crystals that have whatever energy, roots. You can put herbs. You can put all kinds of stuff. Usually, you put like those I don't know, what is that, essential oils or whatever onto something to make it smell good, not make it smell like nasty, whatever.
Not smell like some kind of fungus that smells like it comes out of Satan's ass.
Yeah, so I think they were trying to give her the taste of Tanis right off the bat to kind of be like, okay, this is, get used to this, bitch.
I wonder, they describe it in the book and a little bit in the movie too later on with Saperstein that everybody who's involved in the cult like smells like Tanis root, and I'm just wondering if that's a way to get her smelling like it in addition to the charm, like, well, not just to make her smell like it, but like preparing her body, because it's like somehow that attracts Satan, like, so like the smell of the Tanis root, because for audio listeners out there, the people who's listening to this, it's spelled in the novel Tannis, and the book's all about anagrams, as we'll get into later. And even though it doesn't perfectly spell Satan, it's satin, close enough. It's Satan root, basically, is what it's supposed to be. So I'm just wondering if it's like, kind of a lure for Satan or something, is what they're kind of hinting at with it.
I thought that was a kind of a good thought that you told me. I was like, I had not even thought about that, because obviously this was made up. So in my opinion, that would make sense, considering there's so many other things they could have used that was real life. Also, I never fully understood what, other than when she was reading that book called All of Them Witches, I think is what it was called.
Yeah, I believe that's All of Them Witches, yeah. Which is actually, was later made into I believe it was a made-for-TV like miniseries or some bullshit.
Oh, sweet.
That's like a real thing, and it has nothing, it's just in name only, but it's whatever, it's a weird twist on it.
So,
but go ahead.
It does briefly explain that they use it in their rituals, but I don't feel like I got a full explanation of what it supposedly does, other than, like you said, maybe the scent draws the devil. But like in every single thing she eats and uses?
Yeah, later on, whenever Minnie starts making up her cocktails as prescribed by Dr. Saperstein, which is the weirdest, don't take vitamins, take Minnie's cocktail of weird herbs,
Which then later on he prescribes her pills.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you're gonna be a fuss about it, we'll write you pills. But yeah, like Tannis is in that, so like they're feeding her Tannis root the entire time,
yeah.
and she's wearing it around her neck. So,
oh my God, dude, that was annoying. I'm like, if you don't like it, I don't know. Look at when you're pregnant. I know you don't have any experience being pregnant, at least to my knowledge, you don't. I hope you don't.
I hope not. I hope not.
But like when something smells strong, even if it's something that you like, it makes you nauseated.
Oh yeah, it's like your body's turned against it. It's when you start having those weird cravings, which some people say might actually be, I don't know, in a weird roundabout way, your body's way of protecting the baby, like certain smells of like processed foods that are probably bad for you anyways, and even the best of times, like suddenly you can't tolerate the smell of them because you actually smell how nasty they are, somehow. There's some theory behind that, but anyways, I can't imagine anybody would smell Tannis root. If you were pregnant, the one argument would be if you were actually carrying the son of Satan, he would actually like that smell in theory. So, I guess there's that.
I guess, why was she having, this is a little ahead, but okay, we'll talk about it later. I just want to know, we'll discuss this, put a pin in this, but why was she in so much pain in the beginning of her pregnancy? So we'll discuss that as we get into that.
Yeah, we're getting close to that section. Anyways, the next scene, the only one thing I want to bring up is whenever Minnie again invites herself over. Again, Rosemary can't say no, but this time it's partially because Guy's kind of set her up for this because he's had to go over and talk to Roman. And I think actually this scene is where Roman converts Guy, or maybe like it's like the next to the like it's one before, like because Guy goes over specifically just to talk to Roman, and it has to, the devil talk has to come up during the scene because we never see it, and it's whenever Minnie and Laura Louise kind of come in there and start doing their little crocheting number.
Which was
the
annoying.
Only thing I want to bring up about this, the only thing I want to bring up about the scene, why do you think that she brought Laura Louise with her? Was it to kind of pressure Rosemary into accepting the Tannis charm? Because this is the where she's like, here, have this charm, and like Rosemary's like, wasn't that the one that Terry had? When she's like, yeah, but take it, we like you better now. You think it was like the fact that she thought that having somebody else there, like Rosemary, knowing how she had to bend over backwards to please people, like Minnie knew deep down that if there was another person there, it'd put just that more pressure on her to accept the charm, like she couldn't deny it out of hand or anything?
I think that's one of the reasons. I think the other reason was to introduce her to another witch, because you got to remember, when it comes to bad covens, and when I say bad, I mean with bad intentions, is that it is all about acceptance, kind of like vampires. May we come in? The same thing goes with witches. It's about being invited. And Rosemary inviting her in the house or allowing her in the house was allowing her in her presence, which is giving her gives them some sort of power over her per se, meaning they're allowed to be in her space. Evil is not allowed to be in your space unless you allow it, And yes,
that's
the
true.
gift thing, yes, definitely. It's like if somebody's there, you feel more obliged to say, oh, thank you, how kind of you, instead of, hey, wasn't this that dead girl's? Didn't you love her,
Well, and it could have also been, too, I'm thinking that just now that maybe she wanted somebody else from the coven to kind of come in there and kind of be a judge. It's like, hey, do you think this person would be a good fit?
That
for
too, or
the,
hey,
devil's baby.
If even that, because I feel like this neighbor was really kind of a nobody in terms of, yeah, she was part of the coven. She made the circle a whole, but it was like, oh, this is the girl that we chose. This is the girl that I told you about, One thing in particular about this scene I was excited to tell you about. I think this is the scene you thought I had something specifically to mention. Not this one, but the previous scene where they're doing dinner at the neighbor's house. But this scene, they come over, they pretty much kind of barge in. I mean, honestly, like, can we come in, sit on the couch, start doing their knitting? She's tired. You can tell she's tired. And you know why she's tired, because she says she's on her first day of her period.
Yes, that's a good point.
Did you catch that?
Yeah, and that's when they know when to time the Sabbath or their big rituals, because now they know they can track her period.
Yes.
They can know exactly when in the cycle to, because they make the big comment. It's like Laura Louise says something like, well, if it was my period, I wouldn't be doing anything, honey. And then Minnie was like, oh, these girls now, they get up and do anything, And I think that's another comment about, the whole time period they were in, because it's like women in the workplace, but still having to deal with all the, the monthly, problems that women have to deal with. And, so it's kind of another play on that too.
Oh, yeah. And this is where they always pick out that Minnie is nosy, and she's nosy with the purpose because she took this information, and then you'll notice not too long after this, all of a sudden, Guy has a fucking calendar on when she's fertile, and they know what 2 days to, like, pin her down for her pregnancy.
Yeah, not only that, but he's also suddenly very interested in her and having children with her. And up to this point, he'd always been the guy that's like, nope, can't do it. My career comes first. Wait for a bit, Ro. And like suddenly he's like, we gotta have a baby now.
Right now, yeah.
But and I wonder too in the scene, they don't ever spell it out, but like later in the movie and in the book, it's hinted that the witches basically take an item from you, and that's how they, do their intentions, is they take and focus on that item that belongs to you, and they do bad, and whatever bad happens is because of that connection. I'm wondering if whenever they come into the apartment, and Minnie could have already done this when she first came in there, I don't know, but especially with like the two of them there, and they're kind of sitting there, I just wonder if one of them, like maybe Laura Louise off in the background, just picks something up randomly, Rosemary's, and is like, well, if this doesn't work out, this bitch is dead, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, to me, yes, and that would definitely work. What's interesting about that, though, is that usually, kind of like you have to invite somebody in, you have to give them something. I don't know if you've ever remembered the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark tale in which there was a witch that kept asking to borrow sugar.
Yeah.
And then the neighbor wasn't giving it to her, and I don't know, because they had some ritual where they were driving a nail in trying to kill her. But if you had given her that sugar, that's the sign of kindness that you don't have intent of hurting them. Therefore, she could have lived, but she didn't because they didn't give her that. Well, same thing with your personal belongings. Yes, you can steal something. You could take a piece of my hair, or take, a candelabra or something that I have hanging around, but if I didn't give you that, you don't have power over it. Like I said, it has to be all about, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Allowing people to do something.
Freely and, freely giving, that way it's got more of a connection. It's because it's got you, when you gave also a part of yourself in the exchange.
Exactly.
Sort of deal.
So.
I would argue that that's true, and that's actually a good point, except for the fact that later on, when Guy steals the glove from Hutch, he doesn't ask for it. So
no, he doesn't. Yeah, the only exchange that happened was between Guy and his. Guy was technically like the understudy, if that's the proper word to use. They exchanged ties.
Yeah. They exchange ties, yeah, and that's the scene where and that's actually the next scene in the movie is where Guy gets the news. It's like, hey, you got this part, and the other guy's been stricken blind, and he tried to kill himself, and now he's basically in the mental ward to try to keep him from committing suicide and that sort of thing, and. Like we said earlier, you can kind of see that it messes Guy up a little bit because he did the exchange. He knows that it's because of what he did and because of the fact that he's, in cahoots with Minnie and them. But then he gets over it.
Oh, yeah, real fast.
He starts, so... And then you have the scene where, Roman, they have their dinner together. They're supposed to have some kind of, I think in the novel, it's like bass or some kind of thing, some kind of seafood. And Guy is supposed to bring home the dessert, and he conveniently forgets it, just so that Minnie can show up her nosy ass again and give them chocolate mouse.
Oh, yeah, chocolate mouse.
Oh, my God. If anything epitomizes how annoying this woman is, the fact that she has to call it chocolate mouse, I mean, it's just something about that is so just needles at a person. But anyways, and this is the worst thing that Guy... pretty much does in the movie. He literally sets his wife up for rape.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you... he crushes up a bunch of diazepam, I think's what's in the novel. I can't remember if it, I don't think it says in the movie, but it's like, it's one of those, diazepams, Xanax, one of those things. And he crushes it up while she's, or actually it might already be in there, like when Minnie gives it to him. But anyways, he knows it's in there. He knows that what he's doing to Rosemary, and he's insisting. It's like, well, she brought it over. Don't be a bitch, eat all of it, don't be rude. And like, she's like, but it tastes bad. And he's like, I don't care. And Rosemary does, the one thing that's actually, one of her little bits of agency in the movie. She's like, can you go change the record for me real quick? And then like she spits it out and like, dumps the rest of it. But she eats just enough to make her like paralyzed.
Oh,
basically.
yeah. Which works really
And-
well because, I mean, the scene that follows.
Yeah, you have to have her conscious for the next scene to be as good as it is, because she has to have some kind of knowledge that this is going on to her, and but it's just, when Guy did this, I was just like, I think I sent you the message. I was like, Guy Woodhouse is a piece of shit. That's literally what I sent you, and it's like, this was a scene that did it. Whenever I knew what he was doing to her, and I was like, this fucking bastard.
Yeah,
also,
this scene. Okay, fine. This scene is one thing, but the next scene where he's watching is a whole other.
All right. Well, let's go to that. She getting into that, she starts having this odd dream about how she's on a boat with JFK.
I thought it was a cool scene.
It's a cool scene, and I didn't realize this until literally right before we did the podcast. I was trying to read up on something, because there's an odd little bit of racism that goes on in the novel around this scene, in the fact that the black guy who's driving the boat, for some reason, and it's dream logic, and that's how dream logic works, like, Rosemary knows that the black guy hates all white people, and I'm just like, that's weird. Like, why would he throw that in the book? And I got to reading about it, and I was like, oh yeah, this was around the time of when the blacks were fighting for the rights in the South, and all that stuff was going on, the hippie movement. Like, there was a lot of shit going on in the country whenever this movie, or book in particular, was being written. So I mean, even though it's still an odd thing to say, and I still think it's that's the reason JFK's in there, is because he had just been assassinated. We had all that going on, the Catholic connection to it. The Pope had just been like, there was like the Pope had just, was coming to America, after like this big restructuring of the Vatican Council or something was going on at this time. There was a lot of weird, a lot of stuff that kind of went together, and that's kind of what plays into her dream in this scene. I didn't know if you was aware of that or not.
I wasn't aware of that at all. It was really interesting. I mean, it makes sense because that's how crazy dreams are for the most part. I mean, sometimes there's a lot of context in dreams. You have to really look into it. So to me, that it makes sense. This is why when I have a very, vivid dream like that, I have to wake up and write down to kind of piece together, why did I dream about this? And sometimes I can. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I mean, I thought, whenever I first read it, I was like, well, that's kind of Ira Levin being a racist piece of shit a little bit by putting that in there. But then I got to reading it about what time period it was. I was like, well, if it's Rosemary's dream, and she's, when you dream about things that concern you. And if she was saying stuff on the news at the time about the civil rights movement, and how, like all the stuff that was happening to the black people who were protesting down in the South, then in her dream mind, she would, tend to think that black people must, hate white people for the way that they're being treated, and the attacks against them with fire hoses, dogs, everything that went on. I was like, that's really not as, I mean, it's bad, but in another way, it's like the fact that why he would hate all white people is because of what was going on contextually at the time. So
that places Rosemary's Baby slightly ahead of its time. Because if you think of how we have to point these things out nowadays, it's not as subtle as that. They made a really good point in this film without upsetting anybody hardly. In fact, if anybody, I can't say that they didn't notice it, but it means something. There's a few scenes with a few black actors in this film that they kind of stand out to me, and I didn't quite realize why until now I'm hearing this. But you got like the CW that is constantly forcing sexuality, racism, things like this down your throat, and just shoving it down your throat. It's like, hey, buddy, we want this. There is an artistic way to put it in there. And I'm not saying I'm here to tell you how to do it. I'm just saying, whoa, we get it. Just like, come on now. It's not like we're wanting some of this bad stuff that's going on, but do you have to like make enemies out of people for this stuff when you can kind of just throw in fucking what's really going on instead of over exaggerating it,
They're instead of having the scene where, homophobes bad, transgender, haters bad, like just whole, and it has nothing to do with the plot whatsoever, which is what the CW does, and what, why, we both discussed why we didn't like the Theo stuff and the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. You got stuff like this where it's like, it's in there, you're showing that, but like in a very subtle, like you have to really, work to get it. And I mean, some people could argue, well, if you have to work to get it, then it's not getting the point across. I would argue that it does, because if you plant something in somebody's mind subtly it works on them. It's kind of like that thing from Inception. It's like you plant one little seed that, nags at a person until it, changes them.
It makes it to where you have to think about it.
Yeah, it's like, why, you're sitting there like, why did, just like I did, it's like, why did they have that one scene with the black guy that hated what was that about? And then you research and you're like, oh my God, and then it dawns on you, and then, when you put in the effort to understand it, it brings on more of a meaning to you as a person, I believe, because you had to work to get to figure it out, and also it means more to you once you do figure it out, as opposed to have somebody just beating you over the head with like a book that says be good to people, like it that doesn't, I mean, you hear it and you get the beating, but it's like you're resentful that you had to be told that way.
Look, all I have to say about that is it doesn't work well in religion, and it doesn't work out in other, even political situations, sex situations, racial situations, because if you're beating people over with it, you're only going to get the nuts that really are like following it. Whereas if you give somebody some kind of freedom on it, they are like, okay, I see the good in this and I want the good part, but I don't want the craziness that comes with everything else that you're trying to beat into my head right now. Like I said, goes for anything. You got religious nuts that if you're constantly forcing them to believe a certain thing, how are those people acting? We see how they're acting, like with those religious cults on TV,
I mean, I totally agree with you, and it's like, and just like I said, if you come to it from your own understanding, it's deeper.
Oh, definitely.
I honestly believe, I mean, not to get religious, but I honestly believe that's the reason Jesus spoke in parables in the New Testament, is because it's so vague when you just look at it from like, what does this have to do with anything? And then you have to look into it. You have to ponder about it. You have to sit and, kind of stew it over a little bit, kind of, dwell on it a little bit, kind of live in it for a little while. And once you come to the understanding, it's deeper for you because you did it.
Yeah.
You were the one that connected it to yourself versus like having some preacher stand up there, smack his hand on, the podium and say, you're going to burn in hell if you don't do this. I mean, it works out better that way as a message.
Oh, for sure. If you enjoyed this episode of Rosemary's Baby Part 2, please join us for the finale on Death Holler. Death Holler is brought to you by Blue Collar BS, with your host, Reverend Dr. Death and LlaReyna. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share. We'll catch you next time, and don't forget to bring your death certificate.